anti-apartheid journalist Nat Nakasa's tombstone has been damaged at the Heroes Acre in Chesterville, that's in KwaZulu-Natal. The South African National Editors Forum has called on the Ethekwini Municipality to beef up security at the gravesite. For more on Nakasa's legacy, we're joined by veteran journalist and activist Thloloe. Thloloe, thank you very much for availing yourself on this Friday. How are you doing?
I'm well, thank you. And you?
I'm very well, thank you. Who is this man that Ken Temba called Nat?
Nat came from Durban, where he used to work for Ilanga newspaper. And he came to join Drum and Post. He was very young, but very bright. And some of the work he did in this country before he went into exile was fascinating work. Besides working for Drum, he started a literary magazine called The Classic. So he was both a journalist doing the hard-slogging work that we do, as well as being a creative with his literary magazine.
You speak of him doing fascinating work. Let's talk about The Classic, influenced by the classic Shebeen and what he saw there. Firstly, maybe let's just talk about your encounters with him. What kind of a character was he?
He was extremely unusual. Most of us journalists would go into a Shebeen and would stay there until 1 a.m. or wherever, drinking our hearts out. But Ned would come into the Shebeen, buy himself half a nip of brandy, mix it with Coke, take a slug and say, chaps, I'm fine, I'll see you tomorrow. So in that sense, he was not like us. But at the same time, he did the same work that we did, and he did it even better than we could do it.
Let's get into his work. What was his ideology, if you will? Like, what did he believe in? And would you say he was involved in activist politics?
Not directly. There was some sort of line that we didn't cross. We didn't go to join any political party or any political organization. But in all our writing, we were committed to the black cause generally, because we were suffering under apartheid the same way as our neighbors. So that was what was driving the journalism of the time, that we were committed to fighting for the underdog, fighting for justice, fighting for liberation. So he wasn't a party person, he wasn't ANC, he wasn't DAC or anything like that.
Committed to fighting for the underdog, the work that The Classic produced with the likes of Nat Nakasa. Talk us through that and whether we see something like that in modern-day South Africa.
If you remember those years, it was the time when the educated black made it a point to read. And of course, we were products of the missionary schools, so our reading and our intellectual makeup was designed by the English. So we got ourselves immersed in English literature, immersed in very peripherally black literature. So when Nat called a few people, a few friends, to the Classic Shebeen and said, how would it be if we started a literary magazine? not the journalistic stuff that we write all the time. And everybody was delighted with that idea. And the next idea is, what do we call this publication? And they were saying, we're sitting in the Classic, so why don't we call it the Classic? It was a shebeen in Moy Street, opposite the Rand Daily Mail. And so the Classic was born, and it had writers like Ken Temba, Eskiam Pashele, and Nadine Godima, Doris Lessing. They are the people who actually worked on the quarterly magazine, the Classic. They still had their day jobs. I think it was only Nat who was full-time on the Classic.
You speak of a very fascinating character, and perhaps let's look at his journey when he left South Africa through the Nieman Fellowship at Harvard in the United States. He was denied that exit by the then South African government of the time, but he found a way to leave the country, and that's the kind of character that he was. But he then later, we are made to understand that he committed suicide on the 14th of July in 1965 by jumping from a window, a high-rise building at the tender age of 28. When you look at that part of his life, what goes through your mind?
Again, Nat is a constant reminder of the violence of apartheid. Every black person in this country is still suffering from post-traumatic distress because of what happened to us. Now, Nat, when he was refused a passport to take up his Nieman Fellowship, he decided to take an exit permit, which said he would leave the country but would not be able to come back. And that's how he left the country, on an exit permit. He was following in the footsteps of another great South African, Nkosi, who also had to leave for a Nieman Fellowship, but also took an exit permit. Fortunately for us, Nkosi came back after 1994. But Nat never got that chance. He got depressed in the States, and this is where the story gets murky. The person who calmed him that night says by the time he went to bed, he appeared to be calm. They sat around chatting generally, and he was surprised the next morning when the police came in and told him that Nat had jumped out the window. His family is not convinced that he actually committed suicide, and they still think that some investigation needs to be done. But it was a sad ending of a brilliant life. Imagine what he would have achieved if he had lived beyond his 27 years. I mean, he was a child, and the South African government killed him.
The journalism of Ken Temba, Nat Nakasa, and Thloloe, and you look at the journalism of contemporary South Africa, what would your assessment be?
I never make that comparison. For the simple reason that each set of journalists operates in an environment. In the 1950s, 1960s, and early 1970s, there was a particular environment, and it produced the types of journalists that we had at the time. Today, the environment has changed. Nominally, we have freedom of expression, But in the meantime, journalism is suffering because of technology. So many people have been laid off. So many people are struggling to keep their publications going. People are getting their information online without having to pay for it. So it's a different, completely different environment. So trying to compare the journalists today with the journalists in the 1960s is unfair.
A very fair point. Thank you for indulging me there. I guess in closing up the conversation, as we reflect on the news that his tombstone has been desecrated after so many years of him having, after his passing, being in the United States and finally coming home, and this happens. When you heard the news, or when you see what has happened to the memory of who he was, at least with this tombstone, what are your thoughts?
I was saddened in a number of ways. First, this place is supposed to be a Heroes Acre in Chesterville, and Nat's grave is desecrated, as well as the grave of a Bafana goalkeeper. I'm sure we know the goalkeeper who also died and who was also buried in Chesterville, very close to where Nat was buried. Now, in a way, it didn't surprise me. Our graveyards have become desecrated because our values have changed. If you remember Billy, you wouldn't get people walking into a graveyard and doing whatever they wanted to do. Graveyards were respected. But because our values have changed, anything goes. People have been mugged at graveyards. They have had their cars hijacked at graveyards here in Johannesburg, all over the place. Our values as a nation have changed completely. The way we used to. So it's a different world where we should be reflecting on where we as a nation are going and where we are at this point. It's a very sad story that needs reflection by the South African nation.
Ntate Joe Thloloe, it was a great honor to be in conversation with you. Thank you very much for all the work that you have done, paving the way for many of us to even do that which we do. Thank you, Ntate.